Good evening. You're very welcome to the second in this spring webinar series for myself and my colleagues here in Teagasc, Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal. My name is Cian Condon. I'm a dry stock advisor based in Manorhamilton in County Leitrim, and I'll be your host here this evening. Now, tonight the focus moves to pre-calving preparation, and I'm joined by my colleagues Joe Mahon from the Ballymote office and Shane Kilrane from the Mohall office, and they'll be covering lots of important information with regard to getting strong, healthy calves on the ground, and also keeping yourself safe and healthy as well. Obviously, during these times, we can't meet face to face, but we hope to keep things as interactive as possible. And you can send in your questions and comments right throughout this evening's presentations by using the question and answer function at the bottom of your screen. So if you want to send them in at any stage during the presentations, and I'll put them to our panel towards the end. Without any further ado, I'll call on my colleague Joe to share his screen. And if you want to come off mute there as well, please, Joe.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Thanks for that, Cian.
If you just share your screen there and we can go ahead. Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks, Joe.
That's perfect. You can see that now. Hello, everyone. Anyways, I'm going to start off proceedings here. I'm going to be mainly focusing on before the cow lands on the ground or the calf lands on the ground. So basically, Shane will take over from there. The main areas where I'm going to be covering is on health and safety, nutrition, a checklist for preparing for calving, a bit on vaccinations as well. And then I suppose the question on whether, when and when not to intervene. So first of all, we're going to talk through a bit on health and safety. I suppose health and safety is a big issue on farms in Ireland, and it's something that we really need to realise and consider as a massive issue going forward. You can see there since 2014, there's been consistently high levels of farm deaths, and the percentage of deaths occurring on farms is very high, at ranging between 40 and 50% of all the cases of deaths in the workplace. So really and truly, farming is the most dangerous place you can be working. There's also been a very much a trend in the over 65s since 2015, with an upward curve of deaths occurring there as well. So I know everyone on the call mightn't be necessarily over 65, but we all know people who are of that age farming, and it's important to be mindful of them and just to make them aware of, especially around this time of year with cows calving, the dangers that are involved. As well as that, the reality of it is you don't have to go too far down the road to see of a fatality that has occurred. It's near to many of us. So be mindful of that and at this time of year. And it's good to do the likes of a risk assessment document this time of year, just to make sure that anything that there may be room for improvement, that you can make those improvements occur. So that's the most important thing to be doing, that you can identify problems with, say, handling facilities, and you can rectify them and improve. So that's what we're all striving for, to help to reduce these percentages of farm deaths occurring in the workplace. So on that, with the deaths occurring, a lot of it has to come down to livestock too. So 50% of livestock related deaths are from the cow and the heifer. And this is the most dangerous time of the year that the cow and heifer are there, because they're going to be very, very lively after calving. There's cows that are often very quiet, but at calving time, they can change, and we can't be complacent around them. It's very important that we're very vigilant, that we keep our distance, and that when we're going into a calf, that we're locking the cow into a sculling gate to make sure that she's restrained. So we often think the likes of a bull is the most dangerous animal on the farm, and needless to say, he is very dangerous. But the percentages show that there's more farm deaths occurring from cows and heifers than there is bulls. So 18% of deaths from livestock are bulls. So there's a considerable less amount of deaths occurring from bulls compared to cows and heifers. So just be very aware of that is the case. I suppose when you are going in, always have a plan as regards an escape route. Always be very aware that things can go wrong, and facilities is the best way of minimizing this. But always have an escape route. And as the older people get, the less quick they are to hop a gate. So be very, very vigilant. Be very, very careful. Other aspects this year with the calving period, and it's something that we have never faced before, is COVID. And I suppose have a background or plan as regards who's going to step in if you do contract COVID, and if you happen to become sick, do you have someone who can step in to fill your place, which is very important if that arises. As regards simple little tips when you're out in the yard, if you have your phone on you as well, if you do come into trouble, that you can easily ring someone and get some help. It's also a very challenging time of the year as regards, there's always going to be a certain amount of losses between sick calves or issues at calving time. There's always going to be the odd thing that's out of your control that occurs. But be very aware that there's always someone on the phone that you can give a ring in general in the evening time, whether it be a friend or whether it be an advisor during the day for asking for some advice if you're struggling. Make sure that you're not isolated at this time. So then I suppose to help minimize these fatalities and to minimize all these health and safety issues on farms and that's occurring, design and layout is very important. So as I was saying earlier, restraining the cow is very important. It's important to have the likes of your calving gate there that you can lock the cow in when you want to handle the calf as regards tagging or dipping the navel with iodine or feeding the calf as well. It's very important that you don't take any chances there. Similarly with design and layout, it's important to have different areas such as your calving pen for cows to calve, but also having separate areas like your sick bay for a calf maybe that's after getting a scour or that, because the reality of it is there's often cases where farmers will keep their sick animals, a cow and calf, in an area that's near the calving area or maybe even in the same area, and that's not ideal then for when cows are calving and you have pathogens there, infections around the calving area. So you want to minimize that. So keep them separate is very important. It's a simple tip that will reduce the spread of viruses and that occurring. So examine the following aspects of the design of livestock handling facilities on your farm. So your collecting pen, your forcing pen, and your crush gate. So it's all about the flow of animals, that you're making sure everything is easy and everything is safe for you and the animal. Race or shoot, whether you have a catwalk, dispersal pen as well. And all of this you can find on the Department of Agriculture, Food and Marine Standard S137 outlines specifications for cattle crush, race and enclosures if you wish. There's plenty of grants there on crushes that you can avail of if you want to enhance your facilities in general. And there is a proposed new scheme which will allow for accelerated capital allowances of 15% per annum over 2 years for certain eligible equipment. So examples of that would be your anti-backing bar on a cattle crush as well is part of that. But just be aware that there's plenty of options out there to enhance your facilities, to minimize risk. So getting on then to the actual calving process, pre-calving, your diet, you're looking at body condition score as the cows are going to calve. Now, in truth, cows that are going to be calving in the next couple of weeks, body condition score has kind of ran its course at this stage. Ideally, you want them at 3.25 calving down. But it's not advisable to be changing their diet now at this time when they're just coming up to calving. The time to be changing their diet, if you're limiting the amount of silage cows are eating, is at the back end, just at drying off. Say, for example, November, December time, you might restrict them then if they're over fat. But likewise, if they're too thin now, you're not going to be able to overfeed them and rectify it at this stage. So it's important to be making sure that you're giving them the correct amount, as they have enough energy for calving down. That's very important. As well as that, then on the mineral side of things, make sure that you have enough feed space. So it's important, especially when you're feeding the likes of your bag minerals, that you have enough feed space to ensure all animals are getting the allocated amount that they're entitled to. Everyone's going to have different mineral requirements on their farms in relation to their pasture, and whether it be old or new reseeds, the content in their silage. But so I'm just going to go through a bit on the different minerals out there. So there's different options of minerals out there between your bag mineral, your bolus, and your licks. Now, with the likes of your boluses, just to be mindful, a lot of boluses would be covering mainly your trace elements only. So just be aware of that your likes of your major minerals are very important, especially magnesium at pre-calving, and that often isn't included in the bolus. Similarly, licks, there can be varied amount of intake with licks. So bag mineral is often the best way of going, especially when you have the correct amount of feed space for animals. So here in this piece here, you can see that we have a standard, we have a super, and we have a gold. So the main things we're looking at here is ensuring that there's a low level of calcium in your pre-calving mineral, and that your magnesium is at a high level. You can see then on your post-calver, the opposite occurs. Your calcium requirement is higher after calving, and your magnesium is lower. So as well as that, then your first main section here is your major minerals. Your second section is your trace elements, and your third section is your vitamins. So really, the main point I'd be giving on this is, don't be skimping on minerals as regards the price that you're paying. I wouldn't be buying minerals on price. It's all about ensuring that you have the correct quality mineral for your cows coming up to calving, because you don't want instances of retained cleanings occurring or other issues with slow calvings occurring. You want to ensure that cows have the optimum level of minerals available to them at that time. And that includes, you'll see the difference in better quality minerals here available. You do get what you paid for. But as a good rule of thumb, this required mineral spec, if you follow this guide, and you could actually screenshot this for anyone there who's screenshotting, it's a good guide to take for what you're looking for in a bag mineral in general. So you're looking for as close to zero in calcium as possible, your sodium between 12 and 14%, your magnesium between 20 and 24%, phosphorus then, depending on your silage, P is between 2 and 4%, and that's at 100-gram feeding rate. So the rest there shows that your percentages in line with that of your selenium, your iodine, and as well as your selenium, your iodine, your copper, cobalt, manganese, zinc, and then your vitamins A, D3, and your vitamin E. And just take note the importance of vitamin D3 for the dairy male, especially in relation to milk fever that can be occurring after calving. It's important to supplement with your vitamin D3 pre-calving. This concept that I'm next coming on to is your feed by night, calve by day. So on this, I'm not going to necessarily push this as the one way for all, but it's just an option that is out there for people that you mightn't be already aware of. So the main advantage of it is on labor. So you're basically feeding calves late at night, or feeding cows late at night, and then they're going to calve predominantly during the day, the following day. So the way in which it works is, in the hours before calving, the cow's rumen has less contractions, less often. The pressure in the rumen decreases in the last 2 weeks of gestation, and this declines more rapidly during calving. However, when you're feeding causes rumen pressure to rise. So this tells the cow's body that it's not ready to calve just yet, and a night feeding leads to a decline in pressure during the daytime. So that's the main way in which it works. What a lot of lads do in this practice would do is they would feed the cows, and they would put out their silage, but they'd push it in just before, say, 9 or 10 o'clock. And there has been some trial work done on it before, and David Gleason in Teagasc in 2007 done a bit, and he's seen a difference of when he was feeding by night, calving by day, he'd 85% of cows calving during the day. So say excluding between 12 at night to 6 a.m., there was 85% in the other hours, whereas there was 76% of cows calving without following this practice during the day. So it just showed you that there was a 9% reduction in night calvings by doing this. Now, it's not going to be a runner for everyone, but it can be a good way of, if you're short on labour and if you're calving a large number of cows. Doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to have to check the cows, but you just won't have to check them as often. Feeding the cows late maintains good body temperature overnight. One of the slight drawbacks that can occur with this technique is if the weather intake, or the weather, I suppose, it can actually affect the intake of cows, because if it's quite blustery out, and it might affect cows coming to the feed space to eat their full allowance. Also, if you are doing this technique, be very mindful that make sure that cows are still getting their correct dry matter intake per day. So you're not underfeeding cows, so still make sure they're getting their requirements. Then just on a calving checklist is the next very important part before calving. Make sure that you know which cows are going to be calving. So ideally, if you've scanned your cows, you'll know which cows are going to have twins. Another great tool on the ICBF is your expected calving tool, to know what dates cows are calving. So it's very important information to have to ensure you're best prepared. And there may be cases where you might have to get in some labour at times that you're going to be very busy. So also you'll be questioning, are you going to vaccinate cows, or do you need to vaccinate from previous years in relation to scours? Is your calving pens clean and disinfected? So have you power washed your sheds well beforehand? Have you put out your hydrated lime and made sure that the place is well disinfected before you put in your straw bed and have the place ready to rock and roll? The dry cow minerals, then, as I went through already, it's important to feed them your 6 weeks of pre-calving. And then a simple thing as cows clean, so make sure you're using enough straw, because you just want to minimize the burden in sheds, especially on straw beds. Have you got your frozen colostrum beestons? Where are you getting it, or how much have you available to you? And what means have you of defrosting it, how quickly? They're all things you want to be considering. Are calving cameras working? Calving sensors working? So just double check all of that. Calving camera is very important, especially if, for example, you have an out farm. It's great to keep a track on cows, make sure everything's all right, because 90% of cows are going to calve themselves anyways. It's just good to keep a check from a distance, to make sure nothing adverse is happening. Have you ordered sufficient tags as well is important. You'll have different calving sensors out there, like likes of your moo calls, etc., that will give you that heads up when a cow is active and near calving. Then just on equipment, so you need your calving gloves, your lube, your jack. Make sure the jack is working right. The likes of your calving ropes then as well. So the best type of ropes you'll be using are your blue and your red rope, just so you avoid mixing them up, and that they're I suppose if you do drop them in the likes of straw, that they're easier to find too. Have your iodine then, your chlorhexidine, your stomach tube, your electrolytes, your Keelan powder, your thermometer, your calf jackets, your calci-ject, magni-ject and cow lifter, and then your flutter valve to administer your calci-ject and magni-ject under the skin as well. Another very important simple one that can actually go unnoticed too is your water. So ensure that you have adequate amount of water there for a cow that's after freshly calving, because the cow is losing up to 50 to 60 litres of water during the calving process. So it is important that she does replenish that, and carting over a bucket of water that there might be 10 litres in it, and she knocks it then, and that's no good to her either. So just make sure you have plenty of access of water, and you're going to need it there anyways around the calving area too, as regards throwing in a calf's ear when the cow calves too. So that's a very important aspect as well. Then on the likes of your vaccines, there's two vaccines I'm just going to cover. I know there's numerous vaccines, but at this time of year, you have your rotavirus corona and your salmonella vaccines at pre-calving. So the rotavirus corona, first of all, the vaccine will stimulate the dam to produce antibodies, which will provide protection against rotavirus, coronavirus, and E. coli. So just take note, you're covering them ones, but you're not covering the likes of your crypto and your coccidiosis. So just know what's relevant to your farm. The diagram shows the window there of 12 weeks before calving to 3 weeks before calving. That's where you administer the vaccine, and that the way in which the antibodies are passed is through the colostrum. So it's no good in vaccinating until you make sure that the colostrum is given to the calves. On the side of salmonella then, so calves can be vaccinated from 3 weeks of age and requires 2 doses given 3 weeks apart. Pregnant cows and heifers which have received their primary vaccination course can receive a booster vaccine 3 to 4 weeks prior to calving. So salmonella is something that it's basically abortions and late pregnancy in cows. Be mindful, it's also a zoonotic disease, which basically means humans can contract it as well. So it's spread usually through the dungs, and if you are having cases of cows aborting late, you may have to send off a fetal sample to a lab just to assess and see is it salmonella, and will you have to start vaccinating if that's the case. So it's just another one of many diseases to be mindful of at that time of year calving. So finally, we're going to talk about the calving of the cow, the crunch time. So I suppose in general, as I was saying, most cows are going to calve themselves, but there is going to be times when you're going to have to intervene. So first of all, when a cow is going to calve, ideally, if you can move her 4 to 5 days before she's going to calve, in an ideal scenario, so the whole stressful period is minimized when you move her over onto the straw-bedded area and let her settle there. But if it's a case that you don't have those facilities, you will be moving her off the slats as the water bag presents onto a calving area. The whole process then, there's really three stages. So between 8 to 12 hours, you're talking about the first stage where the cervix dilates, and that's where the calf comes up to the cervix. So really, you're not going to be interfering at all at this stage. She's sick to calve, but it's only really when the cervix opens up, that's when the water bag comes out. And even at this stage, still with likes of a cow, you can still give her up to 2 hours. Let her see how she's going to progress herself. If it's heifer, you might go in a small bit earlier just to see how she is, because she might need a bit of help. What you're doing when you do handle the cow, so you're putting in your hand and you're checking for feet and head. So when you're checking there, you're making sure everything's coming right. The 2 feet are coming forward and the head is there as well. Ideally, if there's some space around the head too, just check there and see how open she is. While obviously using all your equipment like your lube and your gloves. When you're handling a calf inside, make sure that you're cupping the hooves in the hands, so you're helping to reduce or eliminate anything occurring with the uterus, that you're not going to tear or damage the inside of the cow. It's very important technique. When you are going to go jacking, then place on the jack carefully, not trapping the tail in the vagina. So just making sure it's set up right, and you put on your ropes above the fetlock. So you're at this stage, you're ready and you're good to go and you're good to jack. The one thing to be mindful of is, now that you're ready to go, is to kind of take a couple of deep breaths and calm down, because often the case is it's panic stations and you're jacking too hard and you forget to work with the cow. So acknowledge when the cow is forcing and work with her. You want the calf to come out ideally in a C shape. So ideally you're going to be jacking horizontally for a while, and then as the calf goes past the shoulders, you can gradually start going down in a downwards pressure as well, and easing the calf out in a C shape. So just be patient, slow and smooth, because the reality of it is the jack is the strength of about 3 men, so you don't need to be, if you're going to have very quick pace, you're going to be effectively you could damage the uterus of the cow. Be very wary then, I suppose, of cows that can actually go down at that time, especially you don't be caught under a cow yourself. So make sure and mind yourself at all times as well. Obviously, there's likes of swollen tongues, water bags, fluid color. If it's clear or not, like if it's yellow, it's another case of a calf that's stressed as well. So both of those times you're going to be intervening as well. And really have a time scale. So if you're talking about handling a cow, give yourself 10 minutes, but if you're not making any progress, then is the time to say, right, I better call a vet or call for help. So that's mainly it. There's going to be other situations where you might see a cow forcing and you see no water bag. Again, ring the vet for help, because there may be a twisted uterus occurring in that situation. When the vet does come, then the vet's probably going to ask you about, is the cow scanned? As well as that, the likes of bull data recording. It's very important. So what sort of a bull is the cow and calf to? So if you give the name of an AI bull and the vet has already done a couple of sections on that bull with his offspring, that'll give him the vet or a good indication as to what he or she is going to be facing. So all that information is important. As well as that, as the cow calves, a simple thing like anti-inflammatories is very important. We often go straight for antibiotics, but the cow can be quite sore. So if you give them like some anti-inflammatories, it's a good way of healing the cow as well. And the big thing is to know your own ability, to know when to ask for help, because it's going to be different for everyone. And that's very, very important. Just briefly on the likes of a calf coming backwards, be mindful of the widest part of the calf is coming first. So take your time at the beginning. Once the hips are out and you get to that stage, that's when you're going to have to start going that bit quicker and in a downwards, still in the C motion, shape motion, but ensure that you get the calf out quick to avoid drowning. As the umbilical cord is broken, that can be an issue. You need to go that bit quicker when they're coming backwards. But that's the main points on up to the calf coming out. I suppose the real main take-home messages on it is, with experience, you'll know when to intervene and you'll know when to call for help. And before all this occurring, it's important that you get your nutrition right and always think of yourself first, basically, because safety is paramount, and you can't be replaced. So I'll leave it at that, Cian.
Yeah, thanks very much, Joe. That's great. what we'll do at this point is we'll ask for Shane to come on screen there, and hopefully Shane can share his screen as well.
Yeah.
And again, I'll mention just about the question and answer function at the bottom of the screen. So if anyone wants to send in any questions or comments, I'll be putting them to the panel once Shane has finished his presentation.
Okay.
Yeah,
we good
that
to
looks
go?
good. I can hear you there. Good stuff.
All right. Good evening, folks. I just want to follow on from Joe there. Fair play to you, Joe. You have the calf out, so you can go back to bed now and leave the rest with me. So, look, I'm conscious of time, so we'll get going. Look, we've our calf out on the ground now. It's a critical time in this calf's lifetime. So the first few hours, the first day, is the most critical, the first few weeks in a calf's lifetime. And no matter what system you're in, whether it be dairy and suckling, calf to beef, finishing, that animal, the first few hours of life, the first week of life is going to determine, how that animal is going to perform throughout its lifetime, whether it's daily weight gains, kilo weights, whatever the case may be. So it's a critical time, and you have to bear in mind, you often might see this, today's calves are tomorrow's herd. So the calves that are born today, they're going to be your future suckler cows, your future dairy replacements, whatever the case may be. So no matter what system is, you have to be always bear in mind, today's calves are going to be your herd in a few years' time. So we want to look after them as best we can. So it's a critical time. We put a lot of effort getting the cow and calf looking after for 9 months, and as Joe has gone through the process there, and we still, there's a lot of work has to be done to get that calf up and running in its lifetime. Okay, so I suppose in this context, like, why is calf care so important? So look at the first thing I look at here, this table. It's looking at bovine farm deaths in 2019, and I'm only looking at 0 to 6 weeks and from 6 weeks to 6 months. Now, the source of this information is from the Department of Agriculture, the bovine stats for 2019. It's a great report. It's there for every year. It gives all the information, imports, exports, births, sales, whatever, within the livestock sector in Ireland. So it's up there on the department website. So this is where I'm getting this information from. So if we look at it in this context, there's obviously big issues out there. And if we look at beef sired calves from 0 to 6 weeks to on-farm deaths, we have 26,967. Let me just put on my pointer here. So if we look at beef sired calves 0 to 6 weeks, we have 26,967. Dairy sired calves, 21,175. So given total deaths of 48,000, just over 48,000 here, 0 to 6 weeks. Fast forward that a bit for 6 weeks to 6 months. This is maybe where calves are getting down with scour or other issues. So you can see beef sired calves there again up in 25,000. Dairy sired calves 17,700, given 42,000 deaths. So in total there, by 6 months, nearly 90,000 calves are dead on farm. Like, that's an astonishing figure. We calve down about 2.3 million calves between the dairy and suckler herd. So when you take the mortality at 0 to 6 weeks, just over 2% and just under 4% 6 weeks to 6 months, your mortality is just under 6% there up to 6 months. So it's a massive figure. If to put in context, that's 90,000. All the calf births here in our region, Sligo, Leitrim, Donegal, totals 120,000. So if you're thinking 3/4 of them calves born in them 3 counties are dead by 6 months. It's a huge issue at farm level and also at national level, when we're talking about the national economy, that many calves are going under. Okay, so what are the issues out on farm there? Okay, so I seen an article in Vet's Corner, in the Farmer's Journal a couple of years ago, and it was by a Martin Ryan. So it's on the back page of the Farmer's Journal every week. So, and the heading was "Calves Killed by Killer Bees." Okay, so I just kind of stuck out in my head and I said, what's this about? So I took a copy of it. I gave it out to the local discussion groups. But really, what the heading is: calves killed by killer bees. You can see here, as Martin outlined, lack of bee stints, damp bedding, and breezes or drafts, within the calf shed. So those 3 points, if you're ticking the box on all them 3, you're probably going to have very few ailments. You're well on the way to having healthy calves. So move on from that, then you're beasting, or we talk about the golden hour. So this first hour in the calf's lifetime is critical. So Joe went through it there. You have the calf out on the ground, lovely job, you're delighted. So you're going to leave him laying there in damp, cold conditions in a corner. And you know, in some cases, that's what does go on, unfortunately. You have all the hard work done, but then, you know, there's more to do. So this first hour is critical. Okay, resuscitation might be needed. If it's a hard calving or coming back with, you know, large, heavy calf, hard calving. So you might need some bit of resuscitation. You want to get the calf sitting up, his front feet out. You want to get the calf, you know, encourage the cow to lick the calf. In some cases, you might have to lift the calf up to, you know, get fluid off the lungs or that, you know, and that's not easy. We're talking about health and safety there. In any of these situations, the cow should be restrained, because when a cow or heifer calves, you just don't know how they are going to react. No matter how you get on with your cow, you might think you have the best pets ever, but when they calve, they're a different animal altogether. So always bear in mind, if you're assisting a calf after calf, and have the cow restrained, okay, because, you know, you could be there on your own, no one around, and you could be injured and maybe no one to help you. Again, we can't overemphasize clean environment. So if you're handing the cow in the crush at calving, you know, you want to be calving, you know, jacking out the calf that's landing on a nice clean bed of straw, not into a pile of dung. The same then when you get the calf out to the calving pen, and for the calf and him to interact, the cow and him to interact, that it's a clean environment. One big issue is navel ill, and a lot of calves go down with this. And again, it's related to the clean environment that you're bringing the calf into. So we need lots of straw there. But, you know, what is navel ill? It's an infection. When the calf is born, you know, most people probably dip it in iodine. It's best practice on any farm. Hopefully it's good on most farms. So you have your iodine there, or you have your chlorhexidine. Some people are using, but some people have switched from the iodine. Maybe you might see, and you might have seen on your own farm, some cases where maybe a cow is deficient in iodine and she's over vigorous and licking the navel, and she won't stop licking it. And myself and Joe were talking about this yesterday. He's seen where a calf died, just bled to death from over vigorous licking. So whichever way you're using, iodine or the chlorhexidine. Now, you might need to repeat that too at 12 and 24 hours. It's also good practice, because until that navel kind of dries up, you know, it's still open to infection. So your calf is born naked into this world with no immunity, and that navel is a huge issue. And then, you know, if you're selling calves in a dairy scenario, if you're selling calves, you know, them calves will stand out in a mart, or even weanlings at 9-10 months. You know, the people around the ring will see large navels, and it's just, they don't belong pointing out to you or the auctioneer. So you're going to be down money there. So with large navels. Going on to our colostrum then. So this is the most important issue probably in calf care. It's a big issue on farms, you know, not enough colostrum we got into calves. So I don't know how people manage it. You know, some people, you know, the cow might calve, they might go back to bed and not worry about saying, "Ash, the calf will suck himself, he'll be grand. I have my job done." But, you know, a lot of cases that doesn't happen. So we have a simple 1, 2, 3 rule here, and you might have heard before around the Teagasc talk. So it's the milk from the first milking. It's the feed it in the first 2 hours, and feed 3 liters. Okay, so a minimum of 3 liters. Okay, some of your suckler cows mightn't just have that volume. Certainly no problem with your dairy cows to get that sort of volume out, but feed as much as you can, you know, as quickly as possible. Get it into that calf. Okay, excuse me. So when we talk about the quality, it's been shown that beef breeds are probably better quality than dairy. So look, your dairy cow is probably bred to produce large amounts of milk straight away, so that colostrum can be a bit diluted, but it'd be still adequate. You could have issues with poor quality, okay, with your colostrum. You might see there, I've down where cows leak milk. Okay, so you might see a cow maybe a few hours before calving or a day before calving, she's in on the slats or in the calving pen, and you can see that she's leaking milk. So obviously that's going to have a detrimental effect on the colostrum quality. Joe talked about cows and poor body condition score, so I don't think it's an issue really on most farms, but, you know, they need to be dosed correctly and good health coming up to calving. Short dry period can be an issue on a dairy farm if there's a very short dry period, and also on a suckler farm. You don't want 8-month-old calves going around sucking on your suckler cow when she's due again. So, you know, bear that in mind. And then the time lag to first milking. So the time from when the calf is born to the first milk from the cow. Within our colostrum, okay, the key element here is the antibody. So your colostrum, it's rocket fuel for your calf, and it's the most important feed your animal will ever get. So the key element, right, it's full of energy and it's full of antibodies. And these antibodies are known as immunoglobulins. Okay, so IgG there, immunoglobulins. So again, we want it fed as soon as possible. There's two issues to contend with here, one with the cow and one with the calf. So your antibodies decrease by milking, and then the actual ability of the calf to absorb decreases by time. So the longer that calf is lying there, it decreases by time, his ability to actually absorb these antibodies. And what you get then is a failure of passive transfer of antibodies in the calf. Okay, so calves that have that failure of passive transfer, they're the ones that are going to give you bother down the road. They're the ones that are probably going to get scour. They're the ones at 6 months are going to get pneumonia maybe, and they're the ones that are not going to thrive that well. So it's so important to get this colostrum feed into the calf. Just two graphs here. This is on colostrum feed, and so it's changes in immunoglobulin content or antibody content between milkings. And this was a graph from research that was done in Moore Park on dairy cows. So you can see colostrum on the top here in transition milk. So there's a 60% decrease from the first milking to the second milking in antibody concentration. So your antibody concentration is here. So maybe it's up at 120 grams per litre. You can see once we go down to the second milking, that's down to near 50. We read where that red line is where we wanted to be, about 50 grams per litre to get good passive transfer. So you can see once that second milking, we're hitting under that. So it'd be no different in a suckler cow in that scenario. So again, you know that, and mostly you know from handling colostrum, you probably know what watery colostrum and good quality colostrum feels like. I spoke about the issue with the calf then. So the actual calf's ability to absorb the antibodies in the intestine. So we feed the calf, we get the colostrum in, but the time of feeding is vital. So the maximum absorption is within 2 hours. So we've 2 hours there. So we can see at 0 hours, 0 to 2 hours, it's up at 50% efficiency of antibody absorption. Move that on to 6 hours, you can see it's down to 20%. Okay, as we get on to 12, 18, 24. So by the time 18, 24 hours comes, there's practically zero absorption. So again, you're going to have a failure of transfer of antibodies. So it's critical in that first couple of hours to get the colostrum through. Just a quick bit on stomach tube, and look, it's quick and safe. A lot of farmers I know from dealing with discussion groups, some of them aren't that comfortable with it. But look, if you have a vet out of the calving case, you can always ask him to show you, because I'm sure you've had lots of vets out on farm and they've had to stomach tube calves, whether it be colostrum or electrolytes or whatever. So just check. I know once you get the hang of it a couple of times, it's quite straightforward. Slightly less absorption with the stomach tubing because it flows straight into the calf's rumen, and it's actually the abomasum where the antibodies are transferred over or absorbed, but it's not a major issue. Look, if it's 3 o'clock in the morning, you have quite a rough cow or something, and the calf, isn't getting up to suck stomach tube them. You're thinking of work in the morning, but you need to get into them. You just can't go back to bed without getting colostrum in there. Just a quick point, avoid overuse if you're feeding milk, because it can cause acid to build up in the rumen and that'll damage the rumen wall. Okay, it's perfect to use for electrolyte fluid. So where you're scouring calf or that and you need to get electrolytes back in, there's no issue with overuse there with the stomach tube. Again, look, a good hygiene is so important. Clean calving pens between calvings and have adequate straw. You can't just have enough straw, and any vet will tell you that it's worth its weight in gold. Look, it's coming up to a busy season. You mightn't just get with a lot of cows calving after every calving, but certainly a couple of times a week. You want to reduce that infection pressure within the shed. Okay, disinfect if required. A lot of you are using lime. I know from the discussion groups, a lot of farmers use lime to spread it to keep topping it up on top of the straw. It dries things out and it's a good disinfectant. Clean equipment then as well is so important. So we've seen the stomach tube there, but your calving jack, your nipple feeders or that. So just like having the baby at home, you need to keep them clean, keep them sterilized, because you don't want passing any diseases like BVD or Johne's from a stomach tube to another calf. So like if you're using a stomach tube, say for a scouring calf, you definitely want to give that a good cleaning, or probably use a totally different one for if you're going just giving a new calf some colostrum. Okay, so that's the hygiene. I can't stress that. Look, I'm not going to I'm going to talk about scour. I think we just have to do a few slides on this when I have your attention. So look at what is scour. It affects us all, unfortunately. So basically it's an infected gut. And what's happened is the intestine of the calf becomes badly damaged. Okay. It's you're talking about an outside infectious agent that's getting in. So whether it's a calf licking gates, it's picking it up in the feces. It could be picking it up when it's sucking the cow. You know, a lot of cows are coming off slats. There's a lot of dirt. You know, the way calves nibble around the julep and tail and everything. And you know, it's a way of getting you know, infectious agents into the calf's intestine. So that's probably where the problem arises. You know the symptoms. You have loose feces like the calf here. This lad doesn't look too well. Looks like crypto or something. And basically, you have a loss of fluid and salts from the animal. So that's the key thing. He's losing fluid, he's losing salts. And just like humans, you know, we need to replenish them. What are the main causes? So really, there's three ones. There's parasites, viruses, and bacteria. So there's three infectious agents. And all your scours can really be grouped into them three. So we see our parasites is our Cryptosporidia and Coccidia. Crypto, quite a nasty one. If any of you've had experience of it, you won't want to see it again. Coccidia usually 3 weeks plus with the life cycle of that. And you can see it in summertime with stronger calves, you know, this kind of black blood scour. Your viruses, your rotavirus and coronaviruses, and then your bacterial ones are your salmonella and E. coli. And like your salmonella and crypto can be dangerous to humans as well. So remember your own health and safety. If you have scouring calves and going back into a house that, you know, you're taking off the overalls, you're not bringing it in, you know, where there's people, young children. It's very dangerous. So they're the three, or they're the six main scours, and you can see I have most common at top there, crypto and coccidia, and working your way down to probably salmonella and E. coli. E. coli, quite a nasty one as well, that can hit straight away. Okay, Joe spoke about the vaccination, so they're a great help there. I know from the discussion groups, a couple of farmers that are vaccinating that were running into problem with scours, and there's no way they'd turn back. You know, they're vaccinating now every year, and they wouldn't do without it. So it's something, you know, you could look at for your farm. Coming near the end now, can scours be prevented? Yes, of course they can, without doubt. So again, your dry cow minerals and your body condition score. Your dry cow minerals will improve the quality of the colostrum. You can vaccinate your cows with your Rotavirus, your salmonella. Look, at one point on the vaccination too, though, you can vaccinate away all you like, but if your colostrum again and your calf management and clean bedding and all that isn't in place, you're still going to run into it. So just don't think because you're vaccinating you can turn your back on the rest of the issues. Adequate colostrum. Correct diagnosis is important, because sometimes we can go fluting around ourselves, you know, giving calves injections and maybe not knowing what correct scour we have. So I'd say bring a sample down to your local vet lab. You know, most of the local vets can give you a diagnosis within an hour. So like when you go back there, if it's a parasitic infection such as crypto or coccidia, there's no point firing you know, antibiotics down the calf's neck or giving injections antibiotics, because they're not going to work. And then when you want them to work, we've all heard of microbial resistance. When you want them to work, they won't work. So just get the correct diagnosis. You need to have a think about and have a chat with your vet and just see what's going on and do the correct procedure. Again, clean environment. Avoid mixing young and old calves. That can be a recipe for the disaster. And then attention to detail. So your own attention to detail. Look, it's a fairly stressful time on farms. A calf and people can get stressed. There's lack of sleep. But you need to be on the ball. You need to be watching things, you know, morning, noon, and night. Spot them sick calves. You know, get in early. Get them the attention they require. What action is required? And so look, at number one, you have to remove the calf. So if you have a suckler cow and calf in your calving pen and he gets crypto, if he's knocking about where there's other young calves being born, he's spreading, you know the way what comes out of him, it's just flushing out of him. So he's spreading loads, millions of eggs, which are going to be picked up by other calves. They're going to survive in the shed for months. So you need to get that calf out of there. Same with your dairy calf. He's probably going to be in the shed on his own with others, but you need to get him out of the main calf shed and get working on him. Number one as well is rehydrate. So this is where a lot of people fall down, is they don't rehydrate the calf adequately. A calf needs about 4 liters per day anyway, normally, you know, of milk replace or milk, whatever the case may be. But if he's scouring, he's going to be losing his liquids and salts. So we need to be replacing them. So he probably needs another 4 liters on top of that. And the bottom point there, actually feed the calf. Again, where a lot of people, they take the calf away from the cow or to stop feeding it, the milk replace, whatever the case may be. The calf needs to be fed, because what are you going to end up with? A starved calf. So it might be the scour that'll kill him. It'll be the rehydration, and actually that he's dying of starvation. So you'll see a calf with his two sides gone in, and the vet will tell you it's hunger that's wrong with him. Do I need a vet? Well, you need to know what you're at, or you probably do need a vet. So if you have calves refusing to drink, down, or very weak, sunken eyes, dehydration, you know the signs, that sunken eye, and you get the vet out, you drip him and he comes back to life, but 2 hours he's back to square one again. So, he's well on the way out. So look out, your thermometer is important for high or low temperatures outside the range, between 38.5 and 39.5. So again, watch for the symptoms, don't let it build up. So I suppose in summary there, we're talking about getting, number one, adequate colostrum in, clean facilities. You can't overemphasize that. Good animal husbandry on your own part, and some people are better than others, but you can't be calving your calves into a dirty environment and expecting things to work out rosy. Try and learn from the mistakes of previous years. If you have problems last year, do something about it. Be proactive as well. So prevention is better than cure, because when you're proactive, it's better than being reactive, because reactive costs a lot of euros in vet bills and dead calves, and it affects the bottom line big time. So that was a quick run through. I'm just conscious of time. So Cian, I'll hand back to you there. So thanks very much, everyone, for your attention.
Yeah, thanks very much, Shane. That's great. Joe, will you put on your camera there as well, please? And we will go to some of the questions there. I know the time is against us, but just one of the early questions that come in there. I don't know if you want to have a go at it, Joe, is you hear it fairly regularly about the demonstrated benefits of feeding oats to cows prior to calving.
Yeah, so it's something that has been mentioned before. There's no evidence to suggest that it's specifically oats that is the reason for ease of calving. It's just an energy supplement prior to calving, but there's no evidence to say that it results in easier calving.
Okay, thanks very much, Joe. Another one there, Shane, I'll put this one to you about, look, there's always questions about the collection, firstly, of colostrum itself, where it comes from, and then how to store it correctly, and how to deal with it prior to giving it the calf.
Yeah, okay. Well, I suppose it was in my younger days. There was always beastons being collected. I don't see it as much in recent years, but I suppose number one, pooling a colostrum isn't recommended, because you're mixing colostrum from different cows and that, maybe on a dairy side of things. But if you have to collect it, try and collect it from older cows. You can freeze it, for up to a year. If you're keeping it in the fridge, you need to use it within a day. I suppose important thing, if you're freezing it, if you're letting it, trying to reheat it, make sure the water's not above 50 degrees. If you pour boiling water on top of it, it'll destroy some of the antibodies that are actually in the beastons. It'll actually kill it. So just bear that in mind. Don't be throwing it in the microwave or scalding it in hot water. So you need to give it a couple of hours or a day to a few hours to defrost. But it's something you have to be careful with, know where it's coming from. If it's from an outside farm, you could have issues with Ionis and BVD. So, your own beastons from your own farm, the animals are used to your own farm, and they've built up antibodies for that farm. So I'd say if at all, try and use it with beastons from your own farm. Okay.
Thanks, Shane. Yeah. Joe, just come back to you there. Look, something that occurs from time to time anyways, is retained cleanings. The question was specifically with regard to kind of premature or twin calvings, but maybe you might comment on the main reasons behind retained cleanings.
Yeah, so the main reasons behind retained cleanings, maybe that cow might have had a hard calving, which often relates to the likes of your twins. Minerals is also very much a key factor in retained cleanings. So coming back to your pre-calving mineral, make sure you have an adequate pre-calving mineral for cows will help reduce retained cleanings as well. That's the main things that you're looking at, and consult your vet, because there could be other options of washing out cows too, to help reduce it.
That's great. Thanks, Joe. Just another one there, Shane, come in about whether it's better to dip or spray a navel. Do you want to just comment on the application of or whatever the product is?
Yeah. Look, I think dipping is you're probably getting a fuller. You're more sure you're getting full clearance of the navel. Spraying can be, sometimes hit and miss. You might be hit and miss with the spraying, but either or. But I suppose dipping would be the best option. But look, I spoke about the iodine and then the alcohol-based ones. Just a few people have said, and some, there's no problem with iodine at all. But just we've seen in the past where there may be deficiency too, where the cow might be over vigorous with the navel and might just go a bit too far. We love to see our cows licking the calves, but we don't want them to be too rough or over vigorous. But spraying or dipping, no, I don't think there's any issue with either once you're getting the job done. And it's important to probably repeat it maybe 3, 6, 12, keep it up for 24 hours until that navel dries, because it's going to be a source maybe of infection where infection can get into the animal, so.
Just one other little thing that came in there is about lime on the beds and about that affecting the navel. I don't know if you want to comment on that, about how the navel is treated firstly, and whether or not then lime would affect the calf lying on the bed. Then would it scald the navel or anything like that?
I have no heard nothing about that before, Cian. No issues with that. No. Look, we're not talking about huge amounts of lime. Just, I know a lot of farmers spread it on the straw and it kind of seeps down through the straw and it just keeps things dry. That's the most important thing, because a lot of where these infections are, where there's damp spots, maybe leaky drinkers in the corner, spilt water buckets being left in for cows' drink. So it's this damp thing that cause infection to build up. So no, I don't think lime. I've never heard it being an issue with navels, but I could be corrected.
Yeah, that's perfect. We're just after 9 o'clock, so we're just a full hour now. So I'm going to try and wrap it up for this evening. That's it. We hope you found the presentations for this evening both useful and interesting. And this webinar will be made available on our Teagasc, on our regional YouTube channel in the coming days. The series will continue each of the coming Tuesday nights, and you'll find full details by following Teagasc SLD, Sligo Leitrim Donegal, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Next week's webinar moves on to preparation for lambing. So we would love if you could join us then. And remember, despite the current restrictions, you can always contact your Teagasc advisor by phone, email, and text. That's it for this evening. Thanks for joining us. Stay safe and good night.
Good night.